Arya moved across the open yard of the base, with a steady stride that masked a storm of thoughts building inside her mind. The early sun cast long shadows, and every one of those shadows felt like another soldier whispering behind her back, while Blake watched her with that same amused expression that had taunted her since the moment she arrived. She tried to ignore him, yet each step she took toward the operations tent made her more aware that something inside this place was shifting in ways she could not yet see, and she could not shake the feeling that the shift was only beginning. Inside the tent, she found her unit crowded around a nap table, their eyes darting between her and Blake, who leaned casually against a crate as if he owned the space. The soldiers straightened the moment she entered, but their stiffness only revealed their uncertainty, and Arya could sense their wavering trust ripple through the room like a hidden current. She issued orders for the upcoming drills, but she could feel Blake silently judging every instruction, and she wondered how far he would push his silent rebellion before something finally snapped. Hours that followed dragged with a strange heavy tension as the unit carried out drills. Across the training grounds, Arya watched the new recruits move with frantic eagerness, while the seasoned soldiers seemed to follow orders, half-heartedly glancing at Blake for cues when they thought she was not looking. Blake smirked each time he caught her eye, and Arya wondered if the invisible challenge between them would reach a breaking point, or if the coming inspection would force something far more complicated into the open. By midday, the air thickened with the scent of burned dust and sweat as the unit completed a difficult obstacle course. Arya reviewed her checklist, but she could not ignore the strange atmosphere hanging over the base. Soldiers spoke in low tones about the arriving general, as if preparing for a storm. One they knew was bigger than a simple inspection. Arya noticed two corporals speaking urgently before falling silent when she approached, and something in their guarded expressions made her wonder what information they were keeping from her. As the afternoon wore on, Arya made her way to the briefing hall, expecting to meet the senior officers. Instead, she found the hall nearly empty, except for a young private sweeping the floor. He hesitated when she asked where the others were, his eyes flicking nervously toward the far door, before he mumbled something about a last-minute meeting with the base commander. Arya sensed the lie in his voice, the kind spoken only when someone had been warned to stay silent, and she wondered what meeting would call every senior officer except her. Outside the hall, the wind shifted, carrying faint murmurs from the administration building. Arya followed the sound, cautiously stopping near an open window. Through it she could hear Blake speaking with two captains, his voice low but unmistakably confident. He spoke of her with that same mocking tone, calling her untested and fragile, as if she had no place leading a unit under pressure. One of the captains responded with uncertainty, suggesting that the general might see something in Arya that Blake did not, but Blake laughed and said the general would never trust someone like her, and Arya felt a heaviness settle across her chest as she wondered what Blake thought the general would do. Once he arrived, when Arya stepped away from the window, she caught sight of a folder lying partially hidden in the dirt, as though it had fallen from one of the officers rushing inside. She picked it up and glanced at the cover, and though she could not open it without drawing suspicion, the classified markings and the name of her unit across the front sent a chill down her spine. She knew instantly this folder did not belong in the open, and whoever dropped it had done so in haste, leaving Arya to wonder what urgent information inside it could connect to her presence at the base. As dusk approached, the training field quieted, and Arya found herself walking alone along the perimeter fence, thinking through every detail of the day. Strange behavior of the officers, the hidden conversations, the hurried secrecy, it all painted a picture she could not yet understand. Yet the tension in the air felt too deliberate, too focused, and she began to suspect that the general visit was about something far larger than a routine inspection, and that she herself might be at the center of whatever truth was coming toward her. The last light of the sun faded over the hills, Arya paused near the barracks where a pair of soldiers whispered urgently before retreating inside the moment they noticed her. Their sudden silence was too sharp to ignore, and Arya felt a prickling along her spine, as if the entire base was moving around her in ways she had not been allowed to see. As she stood there in the growing darkness, she felt the certainty that the general arrival would not simply test her leadership, but would reveal something none of them were prepared to face next. The moment the general finished his salute, a ripple of disbelief swept across the base, leaving every soldier frozen in place, as if time itself had locked them in silence. Arya stood motionless, trying to control the storm rising within her mind, while Blake stared at the scene, unable to mask the tremor in his stance, for he had expected many things, but never this open declaration of respect from a man whose approval carried the weight of entire battalions. And Arya wondered what he planned to reveal. Next, the general motioned for the officers to gather, and they formed a tight circle around him, leaving Arya at its center, though she had not been summoned. Blake hovered near the edge, uncertain whether to step forward or retreat. The general then began speaking slowly and with a solemn tone, describing an operation from years past, one that had been obscured from public reports and guarded behind layers of restricted files. Yet as he spoke, Arya felt a growing pull of recognition, as if the truths he revealed were threads weaving closer and closer to her own hidden past, and she silently braced for what was coming. He recounted how a mission had once hinged on a young cadet who had made a choice far beyond her authority, a choice that prevented a catastrophic loss and redirected the fate of dozens of soldiers. He did not reveal the specifics, only the gravity of the moment and the courage behind it. The officers shifted with unease as they listened, for they realized the general was not merely recounting history, but leading them toward a revelation they had not anticipated, and Arya felt her breath tighten as that revelation drew near. Blake stepped forward, unable to contain his confusion, and he demanded to know who that cadet had been, for he was certain no officer on the base matched the description. The general slowly turned his gaze toward Arya, with an expression carrying both pride and warning, and the assembled soldiers stiffened as they realized all at once who the story pointed toward. Arya felt the weight of their eyes settle on her, as though the entire base had suddenly awakened to a truth hidden in plain sight, and she sensed that what came next would change everything. The general finally spoke her name, and the field fell silent at once. Every memory of doubt, judgment, and whispered insult now hung in the air between her and those who had questioned her. They had all believed her too young or too untested to command real responsibility, yet now they learned she had already faced decisions that would have broken more seasoned leaders. But this revelation was only the first layer, and Arya could sense the general was holding something even heavier behind his measured words. He then revealed that her assignment to this base had not been routine nor coincidental. The high-level inspection was in truth a veil for a deeper evaluation, one meant to determine whether Arya was prepared to step into a classified leadership role that only a select few had ever held. The stunned silence around her deepened into shock and disbelief, and Arya felt the world tilt slightly as she realized she was being tested in ways she had never been told, and she wondered what challenge awaited her next. Blake dropped to one knee, struggling to speak as the enormity of his misjudgment crushed whatever pride he had carried. He attempted to apologize, but the general raised a hand signaling silence. He told Blake that respect must be earned, but it must also be given when deserved, and that his failure had revealed more about his own character than hers. The soldiers around them shifted uneasily, knowing these words carried consequences beyond simple reprimands, and Arya sensed that Blake's fate now balanced on whatever the general would decide next. The general stepped closer to Arya, his voice lowering as he told her there was one final matter to address, a matter even more secret than her past mission. He said her future role would depend on a truth he had not yet spoken. A truth he had carried since the day he signed her assignment orders. A truth he would reveal only once the entire formation was ready to hear it. And as the soldiers drew in a collective breath, Arya felt her heart pound with the knowledge that the next words from the general would rewrite everything she thought she knew about her purpose next.